You could see what we need. It's easy for you to look out there and watch us on television and say, okay, I see what they need. They could go get that. That's why I'm excited about tomorrow, but I got to take care of today.
Welcome into a new BuffStampede Radio. Adam Munsterteiger, the publisher of BuffStampede.com, joined again by football analyst William Gardner. William, it doesn't feel like we necessarily need a therapy session here, but unfortunately we do have another Colorado loss to talk about. But let's start off with the beginning of silly season, because it's here officially. Jimbo Fisher out at Texas A&M. Mississippi State's going through a coaching change now as well. And naturally, Coach Prime's name is going to come up with the Texas A&M opening. And Stephen A. Smith threw some fire on that on ESPN. But I will say this. It makes sense because you're going to get a lot of clicks when you write about Deion Sanders possibly taking a job somewhere. But I'm pretty confident I'm not going to be covering a coaching search for Colorado this offseason.
No, I'd be pretty surprised by that. I don't think that'd be a good fit for him anyway. And I don't know. I don't think that some of those, I guess you'd call them blue blood kind of places, would be going after Coach Prime. Certainly at this point, I mean, there's legit question marks. I don't think they would. I don't know. I think he's got to have a winning season to really, be that guy. I think they would probably enjoy the excitement, that we had at the beginning of the season. But I imagine there's question marks at this point about him still that need to be answered as a coach before he's just such a hot commodity.
Well, it's really a non-starter. Coach Prime, when he lists his priorities, what is number one on that list? Family, right? His family's all with him in Boulder. They can't just up and leave and get eligible right away. I don't know what Shedeur is in terms of on pace to graduate, but Travis Hunter, he acts as basically like a son to him, and he recruited a lot of these guys that went with him from Jackson State to Colorado, and you're not going to make this move with Shedeur going into his senior year, Shiloh going into his last year of college football, Travis probably going, you would assume, into his last year of college football. It's just not going to happen, basically. And so you can go to the fit, and I agree with you that I don't think Coach Prime would mesh well with those A&M boosters. And so it's really not worth spending a whole lot of time talking about, but I know other folks are talking about it, and I feel like we should at least address it on the show. Is there anything else we should talk about in terms of this? I mean, I would be shocked if Coach Prime is not here in 2024.
Yeah, I would feel the same way. He doesn't strike me as the kind of person, even throughout his career as a player or whatever, he wasn't always, looking for greener pastures or more bucks or whatever. I think he's got everything he wants as a person in this position right here, and the opportunity to build the kind of thing that he wants to build. So, like you said, I don't think he can just pick up and take everybody with him. I really get the feeling that he likes it here, and I think that matters. I think, there's a lot of people on the board that think everything's determined by the Bucks, and pay enough money. I mean, the guy's got more money than he can spend right now. What's more money going to make, I guess, except that to some extent, rich people, that's how they keep score. But that's not really who he is, as far as I can see. He's not keeping score by the money. He keeps score by the wins and losses, and he wants to win.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, to your point, everybody that I trust has said that he genuinely loves where he is right now. And the recent losing streak isn't great. And maybe there are some thoughts in his head of, okay, this is going to be a little bit more challenging than maybe I expected, back when we were 3-0. And that's kind of how a lot of us are feeling. Okay, yeah, there's been a reality check that's been served here in the last few weeks, and it sucks, but it's still, they're not that far away. And we'll get into a game against a really, really talented Arizona team that only led at the very last second. So they're not far away, but it is frustrating. And it's going to take another highly ranked transfer class to get them to that point. I'm curious, William, with this 5430 Foundation and the NIL collective, how much of that percentage of that collective money do you put towards offensive linemen going into the portal this offseason?
I don't know. I mean, I think you got to get out there and you got to talk to these guys. Everybody assumes that everything's going to be decided by NIL money, and that's not always the case. Again, some of these guys aren't going to whoever's got the biggest bag. I think the first thing you have to do is identify who's out there, that's transferring, that's in the market, that's going to be in that market, and decide who you really think is worth going after and good, because we don't need the transfers that we brought in last year on offensive line. Okay. We need a much higher level than that. Okay. So you need to identify and quite frankly, it's not even worth talking about until they get it settled out who's going to be the offensive line coach and the offensive coordinator, and what the situation is going to be there. Because that's going to make a huge difference, and not everybody that goes into the portal is looking for NIL money. And I don't know, some of them want to come play for Prime, I suppose, and we got to have to wait and see who goes out on the portal and who's available first, more than anything else, and how it's going to shake out in terms of how that coaching staff ends up.
Well, just the opportunity at Colorado is really interesting for offensive linemen, because you're going to be under a bigger microscope than any offensive line in the country next season, they have been this year as well. Unfortunately, it's been mostly criticism. But next year, let's say you are ultra confident in your ability as an offensive lineman, and you see this opportunity at Colorado. If you guys put together a solid, it doesn't even have to be spectacular, a solid season, that is going to bring a lot of eyeballs on you as an offensive lineman. And really, if you show NFL potential, could be a big boost to just your exposure for the next level in those scouts.
Right. Not only, I think it's also shown quite clearly that the sort of hype and excitement that surrounds Coach Prime leads to NIL possibilities, regardless of the, collective and everything else, is that you're in view so much. And as you point out, if you come in here, given the story around the offensive line at CU this year, if you're the guy that's going to come in and be the savior, a tackle or guard or whatever next year, everybody's going to be looking at you. It's going to be the story going into next season. Did CU get their offensive line fixed? And if they did, how and with who? And, so if they brought in 3 or 4 guys that are top level, maybe even NFL prospects, those guys are going to be all over the media as, critical players coming in. And frankly, this team's only a couple guys, the statement that there's 7 or 8 dogs away is still true. I look at this team and I guess we'll get there, but we're so close. And yet it's frustrating to me to see people on the board acting like this is the same old, and it's not the same old, man. It's a whole different same old.
Today's episode is brought to us by Macaulay Capital Fractional CFO Services. Is your business looking for financial guidance and support, but not yet big enough to hire a full-time CFO? Well, we have a solution for you. Hiring a fractional CFO who can work with your business on a part-time basis. You get the benefit of having a seasoned financial expert on your team without the commitment or expense of a full-time hire. And here's the best part. It's likely that a partnership with Macaulay Capital will be a win-win situation, meaning that your business will make more money from the guidance of a fractional CFO than the total cost of partnering with us. For more information or to set up a meeting, please visit MacaulayCapital.com. That's MCCAULEY Capital.com. I want to circle back. I kind of transitioned off the A&M stuff. One other thing, William, you're going to ask, theoretically, let's say Shedeur Sanders could somehow find a way to graduate and be able to transfer and play right away. You talk about going to the SEC in a brand new first-year situation versus Colorado. You're going to the Big 12. Your next year is going to be the first year of the 12-team playoff. If they get those 7 to 8 dogs, they have a very, very, very good chance to be in the playoffs next year.
Right. And I think also if you're out there and you're trying to bring in offensive linemen, look, offensive linemen want to block for great players, right? And off the top of my head, I can't tell you who's coming back as quarterbacks around the country next year, but certainly Shedeur will be one of the top 10 of them. And so if you're a pass protecting offensive lineman and you've got a great quarterback behind you, that helps you market yourself as well. And I would imagine that Shedeur be involved in trying to bring those guys to play here. And I would imagine that the approach would be entirely different than it was last year when it was all brand new. You didn't really have a team in place. And now you've got a team and you know where to fill guys in, where you have the needs. And, you can bring them in and say, look, here's your quarterback, man. Here's your running backs that are going to be running behind you. Now, as soon as you get nailed down what the coaching situation is going to be, you can really get rolling on this.
All right, Arizona. There are no moral victories during the Coach Prime era, in my opinion. But I will say I was more encouraged about CU football leaving Folsom Field than when I showed up, even though it was a loss. What were your feelings about losing to a top 25 team, but also it being a game where you had so many chances and for a lot of the period of the time you were up on the scoreboard?
Well, for all of it, for the whole game, and it's not just like we had this one top 20 game. I mean, it's been three weeks in a row against top 20 teams, and we've been into the last play against all of them. And that was a good team. That was a well-coached, disciplined team. So I think there's a couple things I look at. I think, quite frankly, I'm trying to think of the word I was going to say. There were stretches of that game where we really controlled the game and sort of dominated, but we just couldn't get over the hump. And then I guess the story of that game to me is squandered opportunities, because we had the chance to win that thing over and over and over. We just didn't do it. And the thing that stuck out to me at the end, that last Arizona drive, was we don't have that guy on defense yet. And everybody's going to say, Travis Hunter. Okay, cornerback ain't what I'm talking about. You've got to have a guy in the front seven that can take a game over in a situation like that and make it happen. I think Amari McNeil's getting close. But we need a couple of dogs on that front seven, who will just shut that thing down. And so what really got to me was the squandered opportunities. And again, too many penalties, man. But so there's coaching issues, but we stood toe to toe, with a top 20 team and a legit good top 20 team. And for 59 minutes and 50 seconds, won. So anybody that doesn't think that this is not a better situation and that things aren't looking good, I don't know what to tell you.
Tackling remains an issue for this team.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to look at just some of the key points from this game. There were 17 design runs, which sounds like a very low total, but it's actually an improvement from what we saw the previous 2 weeks. Better protection overall. Right. Would you grade the O-line at like a C+ in that football game?
Well, real quick, again, the problem was a vast majority of those designed runs were in the first half, and then we changed our play calling again in the second half, which is frustrating because, for God's sakes, it was working. Yeah, I would say it's C+ for that offensive line. I think they did a lot better. I think they moved some guys around and got some guys playing at different spots that we hadn't really seen before. And so there was real improvement. I thought there was, a lot more time for Shedeur and the ability. He did a better job, I thought, of stepping up into the pocket. There was one crazy play where he stepped up into the pocket. I thought he was going to go for 20 yards, and the defensive guy came out of nowhere and took him down after only about 3 yards. That was in the second half. But I really thought that some of the play calling was innovative and it was different. And they got the screens out on the edges that worked. And I thought that there was legitimately a different mindset to the play calling in this particular game. We got the tight end back in the game again. And they really spread the ball out. Zay Weaver, God, I'm going to miss that guy because, man, can he play. But I thought it was a lot better showing on offense. And I don't know, what was the final? It was 34-31, and I don't know. I thought it was a solid showing. I thought it was a solid showing on both sides of the ball. I thought it was a solid showing on special teams. Mark Vassett, Jesus, he's got to be the best punter in America at the ability to just drop a ball inside the 5 and have it land there, and
I was looking for the rankings in terms of punts inside the 10 and the 5 this year to see if he, leads the nation in that. I couldn't find that. He is leading the Pac-12 with 14 punts inside the 20, but yeah, I need to find out where the real in-depth punter stats are out there.
Right, yeah, we got to keep that. Some kickersrus.com or something. Bill's least favorite position.com, something like that. But I don't know. There's a lot. The thing about we've what have we lost 1, 2, 3, 4 in a row now, but there's a lot of positives. I don't know. Call me a sunshine pumper. I don't care. Call me what you want, but there's a lot of positive things happening, and I thought we looked better this week than we did in the previous couple of weeks, and I felt like we came out with fire and really did some things, and I don't know, I think this team's getting closer, and they're going to run out of time before they can get there, and I just kind of wonder if we didn't have to play 4 or 5, well, 1, 2, 3, 4 ranked teams in the last 5 games, they would be different. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bummer that Folsom Field sells out every home game for the first time in a long time, or maybe even ever, right? I'm trying to remember. Yeah, I think it's the first time ever. And they go 2-4, and one of those games they definitely should have won. And if you look at Arizona again, leading or only trailing in the final 2 seconds,
in Stanford.
Yeah, that's the game that definitely should have been a win. This probably should have been a win. You're talking probably should have been 4-2 in front of all those fans. At the very least 3-3. So that part of it's definitely discouraging.
Well, and I get where the frustration comes from. I mean, to some extent, there was no frustration last season because everything was over by the end of the first quarter, so like you knew what the outcome was going to be. And so, there's no point in being frustrated, when you're sending me into the ring against Tyson, you know what the outcome's going to be. So I get where the frustration comes from, and I get where people wanted to hire, a better outcome in the first year. But I don't know. I think what we're seeing is reality, and I think it's hard to take 50 plus guys and put them together as a team. But I'm seeing it start to come together in certain areas, and I think that Deion Sanders is an intelligent man who looks at things and finds and looks for ways to get better. And I think nobody has to tell him that he has made some mistakes along the way in this first season. He can see that, and I think he'll address those issues and get better moving forward. So,
yeah. Cormani McLean got a shout out from Kevin Mathis, the cornerbacks coach, in one of the team meetings this week. He talked about the maturity improvement that he's shown. Kind of a mixed bag from him out there. There are times when he shows some real potential, but also sometimes when he's thinking too much, or there's some kind of disconnect, because there was 2 plays where he didn't show much of an effort, but then you should see some other plays when he knows what he's doing and he attacks things. And so it's probably just going to be a growth thing with him. And Jaden Milner-Jones, he almost got a PI late in the game, but he's a guy that, man, he continues to flash when he's out there. He's kind of part of their third down and long package out there. And he's a guy that you got to be pretty excited about the future. I'm curious, are we done with Amorian Cooper? Because I know he's had some mental lapses. He's so good physically, though. It's hard to give up on him, isn't it?
Yeah, and I don't know. I don't really understand. I think going back to Cormani real quick, that the one play that sort of sticks out to me, there was one long run. I can't remember if it was a pass or a run down the right-hand side.
Mm-hmm.
And what stood out to me was Cormani kind of went like this at it, kind of hit the guy on the back of the helmet, made no effort whatsoever to tackle the guy. And I don't know, that you can't have that. Now, that being said, nobody else was tackling like Superman out there, but everybody else was at least trying. So Cormani needs to, he's got to put the effort into tackling and run support and things like that he does, that comes naturally to him in the pass coverage. With regards to everybody else on the team, I got to admit, I don't really understand the substitution patterns on this team at all as the year has gone by. You know, some guys play well and then they disappear and then they come back. And I don't know if they're hurt or, you know, if they're in the doghouse or what is going on there. But, you know, I think they got a lot of players at that cornerback spot. So if you're not doing well, somebody else could take your spot in a heartbeat.
Yeah. So they really are up against it now. I mean, they have to win each of their last 2 games to be bowl eligible. I can't imagine either of us think our 6-6 prediction is going to come true at this point.
Not with both on the road for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Did the Stanford loss linger with this team? That was a question that Brian Howell had for Shedeur Sanders. He kind of refuted that, said that all he remembers about that game is that they lost. I don't know. It's on one level, I see how the confidence maybe got taken out of this team a little bit after that game. But, you know, the fact that you lead Arizona for most of this game, you know, and didn't get blown out in the previous 2 games, doesn't make it clear if that's still kind of a lingering issue with this team.
Yeah, and I think, you know, I mean, that seems like so long ago now, and there was a bye week after it, and they had a chance to kind of get past it and move on. I feel like more important is sort of the chaos around what's going on offense and the coaching and you know who's doing this and who's doing that. And you know, I don't know why the offense suddenly fell off. I'll tell you this, you know, it's like you have that Stanford game, and then all of a sudden the offense stops working. Now I don't know what to make of that. Did they tinker with it too much in the bye week, or what's going on? I think everybody's going to say, "Oh well, you know, were it not for the offensive line, this team would be blah blah blah." But I think that's simplistic, and I think there's more to it than that. But I don't know. I don't know that I think it took the confidence away from them. But I do think it's been a bigger challenge to mesh together all these guys that transferred in from different programs than everybody thought it would be. Well, I think some people thought it would be a problem from the start. So you know, kudos to them for calling that out. But I do think I see this team feels like it's starting to come together more as a team as the season gets towards the ends here.
Yeah. It was interesting listening to some of the speeches from players in the locker room that they put up on social media. Prior to the game, seniors talking about how I've only known you guys for a few months, but you're my brothers. There was a lot of heartfelt things said, but I think pretty much everybody that spoke mentioned, I've only known you guys for a few months, but so there is that part of it, right? You know, and for the guys that are going to be back, that will be a benefit going into 2024. But you talked about the offense there, William. I'm curious, you know, can they go up tempo effectively in the transfer portal era? Because Sean Lewis had that thing humming at Kent State, but he was recruiting high school guys that are brought into a system. You develop in the system, you get really good at that system. You come to Colorado and back to the point you made about guys that haven't been here very long, you try to implement this up-tempo system. And what do we have? 8 games in, we have a change in the play caller, and we hear Coach Prime say after this past game, we'd rather go slow and get it right than go fast. So clearly that was an emphasis in terms of Shermer taking over, was we're not going to push the pace like we were early on with Sean Lewis. It's kind of an interesting debate to me in terms of you've got this altitude advantage. You'd like to take advantage of it. But when you're bringing in players every year from the portal, it's hard to probably implement that. We saw so many procedural issues from the offensive line, you know, with this offense.
Well, yeah, and I don't know what the hell happened to Bill O'Boyle, but you know, I've never had that problem with an offensive line jumping off sides and you know, false starting and all that sort of stuff. And I don't know if, you know, if there's something going on with the way Shadeur's calling the audibles or the plays or whatever, but you know, it's just about discipline, and I can teach, I can get you discipline, man. I swear to God, I can. They're not doing that. You know, they're not holding them accountable and making them, you know, pay a price for not doing it. But I don't know. I think as you go forward, you're not going to have the same kind of turnover this next year, I would imagine. You know, and you're going to have a lot of your primary pieces will still be back. But I don't know. You know, when we were going fast, it was working. Seemed like first few weeks of the season, it seemed like that was working. I don't know, you know, what happened to it afterwards. But Can you do this in the portal era? I think you can. We'll find out, I guess. I don't think you're going to see very often ever again. Maybe the percentage of a team turned over as we did this year, and that maybe is probably way too much. Fair to say, I think it probably has taken a while for that defense to come together. Same on offense, but that's a lot of people to turn over. You know, how many do you really need to turn over next year? Well, you're gonna have to, well, I don't know. Do you need to replace some of these receivers? Obviously, Zay Weaver's gone, but uh, some of those
Amari
guys,
Miller will be back, and Travis
yeah,
Hunter
right.
and
Yeah,
Jimmy
some of
Horn,
the
and
guys
yeah,
in that wide receiver room are still coming back, and some of them are pretty good.
yeah,
I think they need to find some tight ends and figure out what they're doing with that position.
yeah.
Uh, I like, so here's one thing they did is they put Hank Zelinskas in number 92 and put him out there as a wing and a tight end and a fullback. Great, man. Where the hell's that been? Because that was really helpful in a lot of situations out there. And I thought that was a great move and really helped us out both in pass protection and run blocking. So, somebody thought about that and came up with an answer to it. And that's what you do in coaching. There's guys out there that you can use in those situations um, in a more creative way and get something out of them.
Yeah. They need to keep working on situational football. I was down on the field
Yeah.
as Arizona was driving, and it's like, okay, on that third down play, Montana Lamoyes Craig is trying to get in the end zone, and you only have at that point 2 timeouts left. You got to let them score. They're going to run the clock out otherwise.
Yeah.
I don't know if other people were doing the math, but it was clear that you got to let them at that point. It was 1:35 left, so Shador would have gotten the ball back with a minute and change left on the clock. And your odds of winning at that point aren't great, but hey, you at least have a fighter's chance there. Coach Prime says they can't get a yard on 3rd and 1. They tried to go for it at the goal line on goal line and 1 yard line, and Shador couldn't get it in. There was 3rd and 1 at the CU 44 with what was that, about like 8 minutes left in the game, and they call a play action on that.
Yeah.
And it's incomplete. That was the one play call. I agree with you. I thought Shermer did some good things in that game as a play caller, but that was the one that really stands out as just not feeling the situation.
But let's go back to that goal line play that you talked about where they couldn't get to 1 yard when they had, eight heavies up there and Zelinskas and the extra lineman and blah, blah, blah. So what they did was the very next play, they went back to the shotgun and 4 wides and they spread the defense out. And Hank, and as my recollection was, I think it was Syvion Wilkerson just strolled it. Right. So you can do the same thing. Now you put 9 guys in the box. They're going to put 9 guys in the box, and now it's a dick measuring challenge. And who can move the other guys. I've never thought that was a smart way to do it, right? But you spread things out. All of a sudden, you got holes and openings. Hand the ball off to your running back, and he gets in there with no problem, right? So don't tell me you can't get 1 yard. It all depends on what plays you call and what you do. To call play action in a situation like that is kind of stupid to me.
Shador Sanders wins the 2023 Buffalo Heart Award. I don't think anybody is going to criticize that selection. He needs just 56 yards to pass Sefo Lufau as the single season passing yards record holder at CU. I'd imagine that'll happen in the first half out in Pullman this Friday. One thing I think Shador does need to work on this offseason is practicing screen passes under duress. They've missed out on some big plays because he doesn't lead the running back and put touch on that pass. I mean, I don't even know if I can count on one hand. I think it's closer to like 7 or 8 plays where that screen pass has been off and it's prevented them from having a big play offensively.
Well, and one play he hit the running back in the wrong shoulder, and he had to spin back around and fall down to catch it. So, yeah, that play works a lot better if you get it out in front of him and he runs into it, so he's running full speed. But there were some times when the play worked though pretty well out there, and that a screen pass doesn't have to get 20 yards to be successful. basically you just got to open up the defense, loosen things up, get 5 or 6 yards. But I thought that, when a lot of times when we ran the ball, we were getting 4 yards, and 4 yards 3 times the first down. Keep doing it. Don't get scared of doing it. So I don't know. Sometimes I think coaches overthink and try to be too clever by half and shut themselves down rather than the other team. I don't know that Arizona was necessarily shutting us down with 34 points in regulars or 31 in regulation. I don't know. I guess that's kind of average for these days, but there was a lot of good things I saw out there. They got the receivers back in the game. That touchdown to Jimmy Horn was beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Just that's like when he was back in the summer and he was standing back, 40 yards and he threw it in a barrel, which is really what that was.
I said after the game in my analysis video with Brian Howell that the officiating was awful, but it was kind of awful both ways. And I didn't really feel like it was a reason that Colorado didn't win. And then I rewatched the game, and that play where was about 5 minutes left in the game where Shador gets speared in the back of the head.
Yeah.
I don't know. I actually kind of want to change my tune on that a little bit. That is one of the most egregious no calls. And Shador was kind of getting hit late all game. That was the one that was.
Was that the one where he's kind of rolling out to the right? He's on the ground and the guy comes over the top of him, or?
Yeah, it was with 5 minutes left. And he went down, and then from behind he got hit in the head. And he was complaining about that, and they ended up having to use a timeout because Shador was complaining with the official. Now, after rewatching it, I kind of get why he was as frustrated as he was.
So one thing that jumped out of me about that play was that after that play, Wells and Jack Bailey were up in that guy's face, and then somebody else came in and gave him a business too. And it's about damn time, fellas, that his offensive line got up and they were right in that guy's grill, and the ref had to come separate him. It's about time that you guys stood up, and it's good to see that finally happen at least, But I don't know, it's like play calling evens out. There was one play where they clearly got a first down, and the guys to hit the tackle knocked it backwards, and they didn't give him the spot forward. So I don't know. I don't. It's hard for me to say that officiating impacts the game too much because it kind of goes both ways.
Alejandro Mata took a little flack, I guess, not too much, but he is 9 of 11 this season on his field goals. Did, of course, miss a field goal late against Arizona that would have given them a 3-point lead late. And I'll say this, William. So he's 9 of 11 on field goals this year. If everyone was effective and as efficient in their job as Alejandro Mata has been this year, 9 of 11, CU would have a winning record right now. So I get you want to see that go in. It was just off to the right a little bit, but I wouldn't beat the kid up too much about that.
No, and then he's not. You can't expect perfection from any kicker, and their complaint from people seems to be, well, we can't kick from that far out. We had plenty of leg on it, and he had pretty close to accuracy. He just didn't, get it. He's kicking from the right hash and didn't get it to the left enough. I don't know. If you're going to bust on a kid because of that kick, I guess you have too high of expectations of kickers, and that's coming from me, man.
I was going to say you were the one that brought up Mark Vassett's game, and now you're defending Alejandro Mata. This is this might be the first time on our podcast.
Well, it may be the last. I wouldn't, write this date down, but defending both kickers might even include them in the top 40 next year, both of them. Who knows? We'll see. Not get carried away, but I don't think. Look, I don't think. Certainly our punter hasn't lost us a game this year, but I don't think our kicker has either. And so, and frankly, what you want from your kicker is to not hurt you, I suppose, more than anything else. It'd be nice if you, to have a weapon like a, I can't remember who's our All-American
Mason
kicker.
Crosby.
Mason Crosby, right. And you kick it from the 50-yard line, but who's got one of those, but
Arizona does. That kid nailed that 52-yarder with some room to spare there.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and that's the way it goes, but I don't know. I don't have a problem with Mata or people it was interesting to me, some of those kickoffs it seemed to me were purposely short because, when he wanted to, our guy could easily put it in the end zone because he did. So I'm wondering if they sometimes called those short kicks on purpose for kickoffs. I don't know.
I think I already know your answer to this, but he's a guy you mentioned earlier, and we really have not talked enough about him. I don't really think anybody's really talked about him. Amari McNeil.
Yeah.
I think it's pretty clear he's their most underrated player this season, right?
Yeah, you know what? From what I've seen, he started catching my eye early in the season, and he's just gotten better and better. In these last couple of games, he's been everywhere. And I watched the TV, recorded it and watched it again, and they were talking about how impressive he was too, and he was doing some great things out there. And I think he's developed into one of the better defensive linemen in the Pac-12 here towards the end of the season. Um, and he's only a sophomore, right? He got a couple more years of eligibility left. So he's really developed, and he's 305, so he's got plenty of size and could really be a lot better as he moves forward. But he's one of our best players on that defense and quite effective and does a lot of different things.
And Bishop Thomas is a redshirt freshman right now, so he'll be a sophomore next year.
Yeah.
Shane Cokes has got another year of eligibility. A couple of the rotation guys, J.J. Hawkins and Chaz Wallace, have more eligibility too. So it stinks. I think Taj Alston surpassed my expectations for him this season. I thought he's been pretty good, and Leonard Payne lived up to them as well, if not surpassed them. So those are a couple pieces that you got to replace, but they do have quite a bit coming back on the D line.
I think Leonard Payne, I think a lot of people say, well, I didn't see Cokes is overrated. He didn't do that much. Well, you have unrealistic expectations of what you think a defensive lineman is going to do, because they're not going to go out there and make 10 tackles in the game or 3 sacks in the game or what have you. But these guys have been very active. Payne has been very, very effective in the role that he was brought in for, which is to hold his location on the field at the point of attack, and he's been very stout and very solid. But Amari McNeil, I think, is going to be a guy moving forward where he does start to get off those blocks and make sacks and things of that nature, and create havoc and create fumbles and what have you. So yeah, I think he and Bishop Thomas, I think, have a very bright future, and they both come from programs back east where they're playing good football. So I'm excited about having those guys. I still think that you got to go into the portal and you got to find that guy, man. You got to find I use that term everybody hates, war daddy. We got to find one of those guys, one of those 310-pound guys, one of those Utah guys that can't be blight. You're grinning. What do you want to say?
I've never heard anybody say anything bad about war daddy, that term.
Some people don't like it on the board. They seem to take offense at it or something. But we don't have we need better linebackers. But that being said, I wouldn't say that. I think the linebacking has improved tremendously in this second half of the season from what it was early, and they're starting to get a rotation in there. But we need some guys up front. Okay. Dominic was starting to come along as a pass rusher, and he sort of faded away this week. But we need that one guy on the outside that can really change a game, take it over. We need that one big 310-pound guy in the middle that's unblockable, right? And you put a guy like that in next to Amari McNeil, and all of a sudden they both become better, right? We need a Nate Landman. I mean, okay, who doesn't need a Nate Landman? But you see my point. We need a couple of those guys in the front seven that can really change a game. And so you talked about putting all of our NIL money into the offensive line. Well, we need a couple of those boys up front too on defense as well.
Linebacker for sure. Yeah, I will say when I keep watching Brandon Davis Swain and Eric Brantley and their high school stuff, I don't know how much you want to put on true freshmen, but man, both those guys look like they could step in and help this team tomorrow.
Yeah, and so another guy that has shown me some things in flashes, but he's not consistent, is Walker, Arden Walker, who every now and then just makes a play, and you're like, okay, I see it, now do it every time, man. Okay, so he's a guy I think that could really come along and be one of those guys. Maybe, Taj McCoy didn't get a lot of playing time, but I liked what I did see of him both in practice this summer. And so I think he's another one that could be a guy going into his second year that makes a real difference up front, and we talk about the transfer portal and it's not just incoming. We got to keep some of these guys here.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's very clear that there's a certain percentage of this team that probably going to be gone. Obviously the guys with no eligibility, but some guys that didn't really factor in probably need to move on. There are other guys now, like, I saw, was it David Connors, the big offensive tackle?
Yeah, he's a big boy. Yeah.
Yeah, I saw him on the sidelines, and man, he looks good, and it looks like that pec is healed up, and he seems to be, without pain and everything else, and he's a guy that could be in, because he's a top level offensive lineman coming out of that Florida program, and I think he's a guy who would not surprise me if he takes one of those tackle spots next year. So there's some guys on this team that didn't play a lot this year that I think could really be factors next year. And
you get Tyler Brown. We should mention that. That's basically
right.
a free guy you add to the mix
right.
for next year.
Right. So
if they just do as well recruiting offensive line transfers as they did D-line transfers this past season, that might be enough. Maybe you want to shoot a little bit higher than that, but
I don't, I'm thinking back on when they hired Sal, and I'm wondering who did the evaluations on the defensive line guys they brought in, because they turned out pretty good. And then you look at the evaluations on the offensive line guys they brought in, and you're like, that didn't work out so well, did it? But then I felt like from the start that Jack Bailey wasn't a guy that could play at this level. He just wasn't big enough. But I don't know. I don't know what's going on with O'Boyle and Prime and everything else and all that kind of stuff. And I'm not sure anybody does. But, they got to have a better – you can't just bring in warm bodies this year. They got to be top-level guys, man, I mean, you don't have to bring in 3 starters from the University of Michigan or something, but you got to bring in some top level guys,
And we'll have all off season to talk about the transfer portal stuff. There are 2 games left, starting with a trip out to Pullman. And Washington State has lost 6 games in a row.
Yeah,
they are still favored in this game by 5.5 points. But William, we're so much more encouraged this week than we were a week ago.
Yeah.
But if they don't go out to Pullman and win that football game, it's going to be tougher from a recruiting standpoint to kind of sell that trajectory of this program. That this is a game. I don't care if they're underdogs by 5.5 points. I think this is a game they should win.
Yeah, I think they should win this one too. Washington State's certainly a program in a little bit of turmoil right now. Losing to California is not good, but. And they weren't world beaters to begin with. So this is clearly a road game that we can and should win. But I don't know that I think the sales pitch here is not necessarily what's happening on the field this year, but what we need and what you and I'm talking to potential recruits if I'm Coach Prime is like Adam Munsterteiger, here's what you can do, man. We're this far away, and we need you to come in and fill this spot. We put you in that spot. We get 2 or 3 other guys, and all of a sudden we're going to the playoffs, right? You can still sell the vision, and if anybody can sell a vision, it's Deion Sanders. So I don't know that the results on the field necessarily. Certainly, it's easier. All right, I give you that. You got 7 wins. You're gonna go out there and go, hey man, 10 wins next year, no problem, right? But you still have the vision and as we've both said in this podcast, we're closer than people think, man.
Well, if you're recruiting me, I want to know what the NIL package is, because I'm about that Ruth Chris Steakhouse life.
Yeah, well, we're gonna get you a what's that car that got the boot on it for Shador, the Rolls Royce. Here's your Rolls Royce. You'll be the highest paid equipment man in football.
Well, in reality, I could give you maybe 1 play, and then my body would break, and that would be it. So,
right.
All right, William, I appreciate you for taking time out. What were you going to say?
No, I think I'm seeing. I think there's a lot of people second guessing, and a lot of people saying, throwing shade at Prime and things like that. And I don't know. I see some people on the board talking about, he needed to be humbled, and I don't agree with that. I don't. I think that's garbage. He is who he is. Again, going back to his saying for it is, if your insecurities are threatened by his self-confidence, that's on you, that's not on him. But I think he's learning lessons and finding some things out. I think he is who he is, and he's always been who he is, and I love who he is, and that's what makes it exciting. Without his swagger and self-confidence, we don't get those um, three first weeks of the season with all the shows coming to our campus and everything else. So it's easy to point fingers after the fact, but you know what? Most people thought this was going to be a tough season to begin with, and it's turned out to be that way, and for some different reasons than I think what we would have expected going in. But there's been a lot of positives too, and somebody was talking about is like 2018. Well, man, we're playing ranked teams and we're hanging in till the end. I'm not talking about moral victories. I'm talking about real, tangible improvement that's visible on the field. you know, I guess if you're the person who's only going to judge this thing by wins and losses, I guess it doesn't live up to expectations. But there's more to it than that for me, and I see the improvement and I see the growth, and I see that we're not that far away from being really successful.
And no coach could attract talent to Boulder the way that Coach Prime is going to going forward. So I think part of it is just some of the emotions of game day. Folks are emotionally invested, and that's a good thing. There was a lot of apathy that we saw on social media and our message board last year. It was brutal. And you start out 3-0 this season, and expectations change. And so I understand why people get frustrated, but you start to kind of see a difference, right, William? Whereas like maybe a couple days removed from a loss, you start to see perspective set in a little bit more. You're always going to have those haters and those trolls out there, but the people that are really invested in Colorado football, I think I haven't seen too much of an outrage towards Coach Prime and the staff. They simply just want to see some better clock management here, and they want to see well, the one thing I've seen people take issue with is the fact that Coach Prime won't talk about the play caller situation. But even as a media member, I understand what he's doing is he's not trying to hurt Sean Lewis's chances at another job.
Right.
And he took Sean Lewis, moved his family out to Colorado for this opportunity. He's not going to run him over with a bus,
Right.
So I kind of get why he's being vague with that stuff, but
right. And there's got to be more that's going on behind the scenes there that we don't know about yet.
Well, there is, because he flat out said that. He said, you guys don't see everything that happens behind closed doors, and you hear rumblings. I kind of have an idea what went on. It's not my place to talk about it, but it didn't work out. It's unfortunate. And credit to Sean Lewis and Bill O'Boyle. You probably don't want to do that, but they're still there coaching these guys. They haven't given up on the guys.
They're professionals. I mean, at the end of the day, they're professionals, and I respect that, because God bless America, man. We have not always had professionals on staff in the last 5-10 years. Okay, and we I'm pretty sure both of us would come up with the same name first on that list of unprofessionals. But when things don't go your way, you still have to do your damn job and do it as well as you can and as hard as you can. And I was impressed by that, watching the team on Saturday. That all those guys were out there, and sometimes you feel disappointment bitterly. And in my day job, man, I don't always get the ruling I want from the judge, but I still got to step up there and do what I got to do, right? But I think that to some extent, Coach Prime was the victim of his own, success in terms of expectations early on and moving forward. But I'm excited about it, and I do think that moving forward, he's going to learn a lot of lessons from it. I think there was something I was going to say, and it skipped out of my head. But people talk about game day coaches, but I still remember distinctly all these years later how frustrated I used to be at Bill McCartney. And I know at some point, one point in his career, he's just stopped wearing the headphones and let the assistants do the thing, but he was not a great game day coach either. Um, and I think that Coach Prime will learn some lessons in this and get better at it, because he's a guy who applies what he learns and doesn't make the same mistakes over and over again.
Well, let's hope next week's a winning recap, right? Because
Yeah.
Pullman is not my favorite place to travel to. It's going to be pretty chilly out there. Fortunately for now, it looks like it's going to be dry. I feel like the last number of trips out there have been sleet coming in sideways, and it's been just miserable. So it's going to be pretty chilly, though. It's going to be high 30s. So, these kids from the South probably aren't going to love that, but hopefully they get some momentum going early in the game, and that keeps them warm on the sideline.
Yeah, it'd be nice to be kind of, I remember back in the late 80s and early 90s when we became one of the most feared road teams because we had an attitude. It's like, we're going to come in there and we're not going to be pushed around because it's your stadium. We're going to make it our stadium. I'd like to see them start getting an attitude like that.
Would you like to warm up before games in cold weather with your shirt off? Is that how you'd prepare for those cold weather games?
Oh man, not me. No, I don't. I'm not going to be wearing the shorts out there like some idiots and all that kind of stuff.
I'm not going to be wearing shorts out there in Pullman either. I'm excited to go cover that game. And again, hopefully we have a positive recap next week. William, appreciate you. Good stuff. And a little less depressing than it was a week ago.
Yeah, it's getting there. Everybody got to just hang in there. And, I think we said early in the season that the big difference this year is that you have hope that it's going to be different and better moving forward in the future, and certainly there's things that you can raise questions about and have concerns about, but I think you still have to feel like we're on the right track, and we're going to get some guys in here that are going to make a difference and really get this thing going. I still think we're ahead of the schedule. Jed Fish down there at Arizona's in year 3, and what was he, 1-11 in year 1? I mean,
and 5-7 year 2,
and
yeah.
And it was an ugly 1-11, So look at us as by comparison, and I think we're we didn't have to go through that in year 1. And well, I know what I was going to say earlier is like and I want to ask you if you think this is correct. Do you think there's anybody else? If I was thinking anybody else we could have hired for this spot would still have half of last year's roster on our roster, if not more. Don't you think? I mean, nobody could have really brought in as much talent as Coach Prime did to turn this thing around.
Yeah, because of the situation that Colorado was in, you could be a really, really good coach, but you're not going to have the fame of Coach Prime. And so you're not going to be able to turn over a roster. You're not going to be able to create the buzz that, got a lot of these guys that decided to transfer in. You wouldn't have that with another coach. So, yeah, no, you would have – and maybe some of those guys would have been pretty good players. But I'll tell you, man, looking at the guys that transferred out of this program, most of those guys are not having much success with their new team this year. So it's pretty clear why Coach Prime did what he did. And it's based on the results of what those guys have done at other schools, kind of been proven out that, they weren't Power 5 level winning players. So, and then that's a mean thing to say for each guy individually, but you just haven't seen those guys go elsewhere and have big impacts.
Right. And I think, the whole I'm bringing my luggage and it's Louis comment got blown up. But in reality, the point that he was making was, I can't win with the guys they had on the staff on the squad last year. And, and there's a huge element of truth to that. And then a lot of the guys we're talking about in this podcast today, are guys, guys that were brought in, Amari McNeil and guys like that. And, I can't think of anybody else that could have done that and not been, quite frankly, it would have been better than last year, but not by a lot.
So you put another transfer class, not as big, but again, those 7-8 dogs, that's what the key is going to be for this offseason.
Right.
So we'll get there and we'll have many, many, many discussions during those long offseason months about the guys that they're going to bring in. It still is an exciting time. And again, we got to get another win though, because I don't like ending a season covering a losing streak. So we'll see if that happens out in Pullman. Thanks, William, and thanks everybody out there for tuning in.